Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks so much for coming on to this evening's webinar. This one is going to be on an introduction to the UCAS application process. My name's Natalie, and I'm the Widening Participation Officer at Magdalen College as part of the University of Cambridge. But I'm not going to just talk about Cambridge today. This one is a bit more broadly focused on the university application process and the different stages in it. So what I'm going to cover in today's session is firstly, what is UCAS? What does this acronym mean? All will be explained. And what does the sort of application timeline look like for university applications? And then we'll talk a bit about how you might go about preparing that application and a few things you can be doing, whichever stage of education you're at, to give yourself a head start with the application process. So I'm going to talk for probably about 25 minutes to half an hour to give you lots of information on all of these subjects, and then we'll leave plenty of time for your questions. So if you have questions throughout, please do save them up and put them in the chat, and we'll answer as many as possible with the time that we've got left. Okay, so to start off with then, what is UCAS? So UCAS stands for the University and College Admissions Service. So this is the kind of central body that coordinates all university applications to universities and colleges and conservatoires in the UK. So it's a website, it's just ucas.com. It looks a bit like this. You can have a look on a different tab at the same time now if you like and see what it looks like. And it's essentially a kind of one-stop shop for lots of information about university applications. This is the homepage you can see here. And then as you navigate through the different pages, it might look a bit like this. On the left-hand side here, you can see you can explore lots of different courses that are available at different universities in the UK. So here I've searched for history courses. I did history at university, it's my favourite subject, so that's what I searched for. And straight away it tells me lots of different options of where I could study that subject at different universities. So you can filter it A to Z. As you can see here, we've got Aberdeen, Aberystwyth and Anglia Ruskin, which is also in Cambridge. But you can also filter it by entry requirements or regions or particular types of history or that subject that you particularly want to study. So this is a really good starting point for just seeing what's out there. You may have heard of some universities, you may not, and so it's a great chance to see where you could study your chosen course. Equally, if you're not sure which course to study yet, you can get inspiration. You can have a look at a few different universities via the UCAS website and see what courses they offer that might align to your interests. And you may come across a course you haven't heard of yet. The other half of the website, as you can see on the right-hand side here, is called the UCAS Hub. You may have heard it referred to as UCAS Track, and this is how you submit and track your application once you decided which universities to apply to. So when the time comes, you'll make an account with UCAS and your school will help you to do this. And this will allow you to submit your application to your chosen universities, again, through this UCAS system, and they will send off your application for you to each of the universities that you choose and send you regular updates to help you track that application. So it's a very kind of centralized system that helps you firstly explore which university courses you want to apply to, and then navigate that process of applying to different universities. So a couple of key facts about UCAS and university applications. As I mentioned, UCAS is how all UK applicants will submit their applications to undergraduate courses at whichever universities they want to apply for. Every applicant can choose up to 5 courses to apply to through UCAS. So you don't just have to apply to one university, you can apply to up to 5, and this gives you a few different options to choose from. There is some exceptions to this. So for instance, if you are thinking of applying for medicine, you can apply to up to 4 medicine courses at different universities, and then 1 extra course that isn't medicine. So a lot of students will choose similar courses, something like biology or biomedical science, or a different course that you'd be happy to do if you didn't get a place on a medicine course. Another thing to bear in mind is that you can choose to apply to either Oxford or Cambridge through UCAS for any course, but you can't apply to both. It's just a rule of the system, you have to pick one of them. And applications for UCAS open in early September, and so you start this UCAS process at the very beginning of year 13. But there's a lot of things you can do before that to start preparing and get ahead, as I'll go through in the rest of this session. In terms of the deadlines, so I mentioned that it opens in September. If you're applying for courses at Oxford or Cambridge or any medicine or dentistry courses, the deadline is the 15th of October. So it's not a lot of time after that application date opens to get your application submitted. But there's ways you can manage that. And again, I'll talk through how you can navigate this process and make the most of the time that you've got. For all other courses at other universities, the deadline is the 14th of January. And this is called the equal consideration deadline. So what this means is all applications submitted before the 14th of January of your year 13 will be treated with equal consideration. So the universities will treat them exactly equally. You can actually apply to university after the 14th of January. It is called a deadline, but it is quite a soft deadline. However, if you apply after the 14th of January, some universities won't have spaces left and they can't guarantee that your application will be treated equally because they may have already given out lots of offers of places to other students who applied earlier. So if possible, try and get your application in before the January deadline, and your schools may have slightly early deadlines to make sure they can help support you through the process. So listen to your school deadlines as well as the UCAS ones. However, if you change your mind about university later on and you decide later that you do want to apply, you do have that option, but bear in mind that not all courses might have spaces left. There is an application fee, so it's £28.50 to apply to up to 5 universities. However, that application fee is waived, so it's free if you've been eligible for free school meals at any point during secondary school. So if you're not sure what that means, get in touch with your school or your parents, and they can help you figure out if you're eligible or not. But for most students, the application fee is £28.50, and you pay that through the online application portal when you submit your application. You'll come across a couple of kind of new words and new terminology through this process. I just want to go through a few of them to help you understand some of the words that I'll be using throughout this session. You may have heard these already, maybe an introduction, but it's worth going through so you understand what I'm talking about. The first thing is a personal statement. So this is the bit of the UCAS application that you have quite a lot of control over. It's what you want to tell the universities about yourself. So all the things that make you a good candidate for that course. Universities and UCAS give lots of advice on what are good things to put in a personal statement, and I'll come on to a few of those in a bit. But in general, it's all the different experiences you've had and the skills you've gained that makes you a good candidate for that course. And crucially, the same personal statement goes to all 5 of your university choices. So you might be applying for slightly different courses at different universities, and that is completely normal. At Cambridge, for instance, we have some courses that are only offered at Cambridge, things like Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic studies, or natural sciences, a bit of a unique course. And so we understand that a lot of applicants will be applying to slightly different courses at their other choices. For instance, if you're applying for physical natural sciences at Cambridge, you're likely applying for physics or some related course at other universities, and that's fine. So in those cases, we understand that your personal statement might have to cover a few different courses, and that's completely okay. Just do your best to try and cover all the different elements of the course that you really want to apply for at the most competitive university. Again, we'll give lots more information on this a bit later on and in future webinars that go into more depth on personal statements. But in general, you write one personal statement that goes to all 5 university choices to tell them about yourself. The application also involves a reference, and this comes from your teachers, often your class teachers or your head of sixth form or some combination of those. And this is, again, a short piece of writing in support of your application. So it's telling the universities a bit of background information about your school, anything about you, any extenuating circumstances you want them to share, and a few insights into your academic performance in the school. So this goes alongside your personal statement in your application and goes to your university choices, and it's usually called a reference or a referee letter. Another word you may come across is an offer. So a university may give you an offer of a place on your chosen course. If they like your application, they think you'd be a good candidate, they could choose to give you an offer. These are usually conditional, so it means that you have to meet some conditions before you can take up that offer. And that's usually conditional on your A-level grades or any equivalent qualifications you're currently taking. And that offer will be confirmed if and when you meet those requirements. So for instance, you could be given an offer for the University of Cambridge to study history, subject to you achieving A-level grades A-star AA in your A-levels of, for instance, history, English literature, and maths. This was my offer, for instance. So that's the offer you get from a university, and if you meet those conditions, then you're in. You've met the conditions of your offer, and that will be confirmed. You may have also heard of firm choice or a firm university. So this is when you've received decisions from all your university choices. So hopefully you receive lots of offers from your chosen universities. You then get to pick a favourite, your firm choice, which is the one you really want to go to. So your kind of ideal university, if you meet their conditions, you'll go there. And that's called your firm choice. The other university you pick is called an insurance or a kind of backup choice. Many students choose a university which sets lower offer conditions than their firm choice, so they have a second option if they narrowly miss the conditions of their firm offer. So for instance, again, example from my experience, my firm choice was the University of Cambridge, my offer was A-star AA, and my insurance choice, my backup, was the University of York, who offered me a place if I got AAA in my A-levels. So it gives you a backup choice and a second option if you don't quite meet those conditions of your firm choice. And the final one is something called clearing. So this is where universities have places available after the application round has almost finished. So a university will give out lots of offers to students and they may or may not take them up. So there might be some spaces left at the end of the process. So if when you get your A-level results or whatever qualifications you're doing, you might find that you have missed the conditions of both your firm and your insurance choice. And that is not the end of the world. There are lots of options available to you. One option could be to go through clearing, which is where you have a look again on the UCAS website and see what courses have spaces left. You usually call them up, you call the university on the results day or the day after and ask if they have a place on the course that you want. And so you could end up at a completely different university than you planned to if it has a space left. You can also go through clearing if you have changed your mind. So if you found a different university you want to go to that isn't your firm or insurance, if they have a space, you can call them up and see if you can get a place there instead. So clearing is a perfectly good option. Lots of people go through clearing and end up at really good universities and are very happy with where they end up. So if you are determined to go to university, you'll be able to find somewhere that has a place for you, depending on the A-level grades that you end up with. There's a lot of words there, a lot of definitions. I'll come to a few questions from the chat before we move on. First question we've got is, can you apply to several courses at just one Oxbridge uni? The answer to that is no, unfortunately. You have to just pick one at either of the universities to apply to. Do I need to apply for different courses at every university or can I do the same one? No, it can be the same one. So you can apply for history at 5 universities or English at 5 universities, or you can apply for a few different ones, but do bear in mind that you'll have to write the same personal statement for all 5 of them. How do you know which universities accept separate personal statements? That's a good question. Most universities will just use the UCAS personal statement. The only one I'm aware of that does a different one is actually Cambridge. We give the option for applicants to submit a short additional personal statement. It's just one paragraph, so it isn't a replacement of the main personal statement, but it gives you an option to say a few extra lines if you want to about why you chose that university and course in particular. I'm not aware of any other universities that do that opportunity. For 2026 entry, UCAS will open in September 2025. Can they lower the entry requirements? So yes, this is a good question. So every university will publish their typical entry requirements on their website and on UCAS. And so you can roughly see what your offer might be. However, some universities make what they call contextual offers, where if you meet some widening participation criteria, which is often things like being eligible for free school meals or being care experienced or going to a low performing school. They could make you a different offer, sometimes lower, sometimes different grades, but that is at the university discretion. So there's no guarantee what your offer would be until you get it. You can get a rough idea from their website and the information they provide, but everyone's offer is completely individual and very personal. So there's no guarantee kind of what your offer would be until you receive it. Does your teacher have to write your reference or can it be someone else? So it's usually whoever kind of coordinates UCAS applications in your school. So often the head of sixth form or the head of college will write the kind of introduction section and will invite your class teachers to contribute a few lines each. It does need to be a kind of academic reference, so someone who knows your academic performance, so ideally a teacher, but if you're not currently in school, get in touch with the universities you want to apply to and they can advise who's best placed to write a reference for you. Will an offer ever require higher grades than stated on the website? Possibly. Again, there's no guarantee what your offer could be. They do reserve the right to make different entry requirements based on that year's worth of applications. So just bear that in mind as well. Just trying to think the most kind of relevant questions to this subject, and then we'll move on. A Cambridge question, is it correct that Cambridge changed the entry requirement grades to match your predicted grades if your school predicts you higher grades than the entry requirements? So this is a good question. This is what I was a bit worried about when I was applying to Cambridge. So usually no. We do look at predicted grades as a kind of estimate of what you might get, but Cambridge makes quite standard offers in a lot of subjects, which are based on the A-levels that you're doing and the competitiveness of that course. So if a Cambridge College made you a harder offer or a higher offer, it wouldn't normally because of your predicted grades, it's normally because of the competitiveness of that cohort, if that makes sense. So don't worry about being predicted 3A stars, for instance. That's a great thing if you are, but that wouldn't change the offer that you'd get. So I hope that helps. I think we'll just do one last question for this section, which is if you not made the grade requirements in one of your subjects and it was sent off to remarked, would the new remark grade be considered to get into your firm university? So if you sent off one of your A-levels to be remarked and you received a remark, usually by the 31st of August or sometimes in September, then that would allow you to get into your firm university and they would kind of reserve a space for you to make sure you could come. If your remarks came back later than that, a lot of universities wouldn't be able to guarantee you a space, but sometimes they could guarantee you a space for the following year if you take a gap year or you go through clearing and choose a different university. So again, it's quite an individual process, but there are systems in place to make sure that everyone gets a space at a university and they try and be as fair as possible, but it is a tricky situation. Okay, we'll move on for now, but I'll come back to more questions at the end. So what your UCAS application looks like, and there's lots of different elements to it. Some will kind of take more time to complete than others, but it's worth knowing what you'll have to do when you open your application. So when you start your UCAS application, usually in September of year 13, you'll kind of make an account on UCAS Hub and you'll connect your account to your school so they can provide a reference and also check it over for you before you submit to help you out in that situation. The elements of the application look a bit like this. You start off by entering your personal details, so things like your email address, so they can keep in touch with you, your residency status, so if you'd be eligible for home or international tuition fees, and there's advice on this if you're not sure, and your school name, as I mentioned, to connect you up with your school's UCAS account. You also put in your education history, so all the subjects you did for GCSE or equivalent and the grades that you got in them, and the qualifications that you're currently studying. So your A-levels, T-levels, BTECs, an EPQ, whatever qualifications you're currently doing, you put those in as well. You don't put grades for those because you haven't got them yet, but your teachers will add predicted grades of what they think you might achieve by the end of year 13. They also ask for your employment history, so any full-time or part-time jobs you've done over the last few years. This wouldn't affect your likelihood of getting an offer. It's more for mature students, so kind of adult students who are applying a bit later on to understand what experience they've got in between school and university. But you can put your cafe jobs, waitressing, paper round in there just to fill that box. Then your course choices, so the 5 university courses you want to apply to, and you select those from options on the UCAS apply page. Your personal statement, as I mentioned, I'll come on to in a little bit as well, and then your teachers will add their reference as well. And then you pay the application fee, send it off, and that's your application done. So it isn't a huge amount of work. The main bit is your personal statement. The other parts are mostly kind of admin data to help with assessing your application. In terms of the timeline of all this, we'd recommend thinking about your application definitely by the spring and summer of year 12. And in that time, you can start exploring university course choices, either through the UCAS website or on university websites. Going to things like this is great, and also other outreach events like Magdalen's Subject Data series, where we do webinars on particular courses offered at Cambridge. If you've been to any of those recently, there's some more coming up. You might also go to University Open Days. These often take place in June and July, and there might also be kind of virtual tours or virtual events to help you get a sense of that university if you can't go in person as well. You might also want to start drafting your personal statement, and again, I'll come on to this next of what it might look like, but it's a good idea to start pairing those sorts of things so when you get into year 13, which is a very busy year, you've got a draft to work with and you can send off your application before deadline. When you get into year 13, it's about kind of redrafting that personal statement, getting it into a shape that you're happy with, finalising the courses and universities you want to apply to. Starting off your application, you can come back to it, so you can start off with the UCAS hub in September and kind of save your progress and come back to it at a later date. Submit the application by the deadlines, so either October if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, or January if you're applying to other courses. And you might have to attend an admissions assessment or an interview depending on which universities and courses you're applying for. So have a look on their websites if there's any extra steps in the application process, like an admissions test or an interview that you should be aware of. And then finally, in kind of spring of year 13, you'll get some offers, hopefully, from your university choices. So universities can start sending you offers from as soon as you submit your application. So the earlier you submit, the earlier you start getting offers. I got my first offer about 2 days after I submitted my application, so they can be quite quick. Some universities will have set dates when they send out offers. So for instance, Oxford and Cambridge have set dates in January where they send out all the offers on the same day, whereas a lot of other universities will send them out at random points throughout the kind of autumn and spring terms. And then once you've got all your decisions in, you can select your firm and insurance choice. So the university you really want to go to and your backup choice from the offers that you've been given. So a few extra things to bear in mind here. Some universities may have extra steps in the application process that go beyond the main kind of UCAS hub. So for instance, as I mentioned, Cambridge asks applicants to submit a short optional additional personal statement in the My Cambridge application portal. This is a short extra application form you're sent a link to after you submit your main UCAS application that asks a few more questions that just go to Cambridge. It's quite a unique Cambridge thing, and it doesn't take very long, just a few extra questions there. Oxford, Cambridge and medical schools and a few other courses will invite students for interview. So these may be in person or online, and so they will give information on their website and communicate via email to give information about that. And if you're applying for things like law or medicine and some courses at Oxford and Cambridge, you may also sit admissions assessment. So you may have heard of the LNAT for law, the BMAT or the UCAT for medicine, and Oxford and Cambridge have some other admissions tests that we use. So again, have a look on the websites for information about that. You might have to pre-register, so it does require a bit of organisation to get in ahead of deadlines. And communication for those things normally comes directly from the university and not via UCAS. So the main application goes through UCAS, but there may be a few extra steps that are communicated via email from the individual universities. So crucially, whichever email address you use for UCAS, please check it regularly. You'll receive lots of correspondence through there. So make sure it's an email address that you will check regularly to get updates on your application. Okay, before we go into this last section, I'll just check the chat box for any more questions again. Are you able to read the reference that your teachers put in the application? Not through UCAS. So sometimes teachers will be happy to share it with you if you ask them, but not through UCAS. So it's up to your teachers to share it with you. Can more than one teacher write your reference if you go to two schools for different subjects? Yes, talk to them, communicate with them, and the kind of lead teacher can get part of the reference from your other teachers. If you do 4 A-levels, is your offer for your top 3 grades? Not always. So again, offers are very personal and very individual. So some universities could make you an offer based on just 3 A-levels and say you can drop the 4th or just have to pass the 4th. Others will make you an offer that includes all 4 A-levels. So bear that in mind. Do you have to apply for 5 different universities? Can it only be 2? So no, it doesn't have to be 5. It's usually 5 courses at some number of universities. Oxford and Cambridge can only apply to 1 course, but many other universities can apply to multiple. So again, have a look at individual university requirements. And finally, do GCSE results matter? So you do have to give GCSE results, you put them in the application, and universities will look at them. They're a good indicator of your kind of academic progress throughout the last few years, but we will also look at your A-level predicted grades from your teachers, which are a more up-to-date indicator of how you're doing now rather than kind of 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, so preparing your application then. As I mentioned, the main part of the UCAS application you can start working on is your personal statement. So as one of you pointed out in the chat, for 2026 entry onwards, so current year 12s, there is a new structure of personal statements which asks you these 3 questions. Firstly, why do you want to study this course or subject? Secondly, how have your qualifications and studies so far helped you prepare for this subject? And finally, what else have you done to prepare outside of education and how the experience is useful? So don't worry about this being a new structure. The advice that I'll give and the content you'll write is very, very similar to what previous years have written in the old personal statement structure. The questions just give a bit more advice and guidance on what universities like to see in a personal statement and helps you stay focused on these 3 different topics. So some advice on these things. Your answers to all 3 questions need to add up to 4,000 characters. This is the same limit that previous applicants had for the old personal statement. It's about 1 page of A4, usually about 400 or 500 words. However, those 4,000 characters don't have to be equally spread between the 3 questions. So you have to write something for all 3 questions, but you may find that some questions are longer than others. We're not sure, we haven't seen it yet, but we think question 2 might be a good space to put a bit more content. There's a lot you could write there. But again, it's up to you how you spread your content across the 3 questions. For question 2, this is the one about qualifications and studies. And we think this word studies is really important. We'd encourage you to interpret this quite broadly. So studies both inside and outside of school. You may have heard the term super-curricular activities, and I'll give some more information on this in a second, but things that you do outside of school that relate to your academic interests. So wider reading, watching documentaries, listening to podcasts, going to summer schools, doing work experience. This can all count as studies, whether it's inside school or outside. And throughout the personal statement, focus on giving examples of how you prepared for the course and what you did to how these things benefited you. So all the experiences you've had, things you've read, things you've done, and what you gained from them. Can you reflect on them to tell us what you learned, what you gained, and why these things were useful to you as an applicant for that course? So the main thing here we think is super-curricular activities. And these have been a focus of personal statements for years and years, not a new thing at all. So a super-curricular is anything you can do outside of the school curriculum that relates to your academic interests. And it can be anything at all. If you're more of a kind of audible learner, you can listen to podcasts and hear people talk about the subject. If you're a visual learner, it can be things like documentaries or ways of watching things happen, more practical experiences. If you're applying for STEM subjects, this is often a bit different. You might know much of a reader, and that's absolutely fine. It's often problem-solving questions using websites like Isaac Physics or Enrich Maths. These are really good ways to enhance your problem-solving skills and show the university that you're developing the right sorts of skills and qualities in preparation for the course. So there's some inspiration here of where you could go for super-curricular activities. And again, the slides will be available on the website in a few days' time. There's also these two resources we recommend. On the left, if you Google or search engine of your choice, Cambridge Super-curricular Suggestions. This is a big PDF that's put together by lecturers from Cambridge. And it's not just for Cambridge courses, it can be applicable to any university that offers similar subjects. So there's a page for each subject offered at Cambridge. This one here is Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, beginning of the alphabet. And you can see there's some recommendations of where you might want to start with supercurriculars, split into books, websites, podcasts, work experience things. And there's one of these for every course that we offer. The other one here is a website called Inside Uni. This is quite similar, but it's produced by current students at Oxford and Cambridge. So it's all the things they used when they were applying to these courses and that they found useful. So have a look on the website as well. Lots of resources, again, split up into kind of online things and books and websites. So you can see what you're in the mood for and try out some of these. They're definitely not a reading list and they're not compulsory, so don't feel like you have to complete any or all of them. They're just a starting point, and then from there you can see where your interests take you and what you want to explore next. So it's really personal to you, what you find interesting in your subject. Everyone has a favourite bit of their subject or a favourite topic or a favourite area, and you can really delve into those interests in preparation for your personal statement. The reason that we like these things as universities and think they're important is firstly because it confirms that the subject really interests you. If you're finding it enjoyable and interesting to explore the subject outside of school, kind of in your own time, that's a really good sign you'd enjoy it at university as well. And that's what you want to check. You can have a good time and enjoy your subject for 3 or 4 or more years that you're at university. Supercurriculars also build your subject knowledge and your academic skills, so it's good revision, if nothing else, and it also builds your research skills, note-taking, kind of reflecting, creating your own argument as well, having your own opinion. And finally, showing your motivation and your organisation skills. So it shows university that you are willing to put the effort in, put a bit of time in here and there to do some supercurriculars, do some reading, watch a documentary, listen to a podcast, because you find it interesting, because you enjoy it, that you have that motivation and the time management to fit that into your busy schedule. Doesn't have to take up loads and loads of time. You've got some holidays coming up, especially over the summer, to get some supercurriculars done and have that preparation ready for when you come to write your personal statement. When you are doing supercurriculars, it's a good idea to reflect on what you've learned, and this content will come in really, really useful when you come to write your personal statement. The strongest applicants to university courses will be able to critically engage with what they've learned. So asking yourself things like, what was the main argument presented by the author of the book that you read, and do you agree? You don't have to. You can have your own opinion. You can tell us why something else that you read was more persuasive or more engaging in this particular aspect, and bring those things into conversation, having your own opinion and own ideas. These are really, really good skills to demonstrate to universities. You can also think about any further questions that inspired you to research. So if you watched a documentary and they mentioned a particular historian, for instance, you could go ahead and read one of their articles or their books, and then check the references of the article and see what else you can explore to further develop your knowledge and enhance your academic skills further. And you can tell that story in your personal statement. You can explain the kind of research train that you went down and how you were inspired by a few different resources and link them together with your own ideas. And this can produce a really nice personal statement, but in the meantime, it's a nice thing to take some notes and get ready so that when you do come to write your personal statement, you've got the content already there. I won't go into too much depth on personal statements now, but just to say that there will be a webinar in May this year, again from Magdalene, on personal statements in a lot more depth. So if you're not already signed up to our mailing list, the QR code is here, and you'll be notified when bookings open for that session as well. So I'll just come to the chat for a second for any more questions before going to the last little section. Do we still write one whole personal statement, or do we submit for each section? So the way it will appear on the UCAS hub is as kind of 3 text boxes that you fill in. We recommend kind of writing it in a Word document first and then copying and pasting it into the UCAS hub, just so you can see kind of track changes and things like that. But yes, you'll have kind of different boxes to fill in. If you can't fit all your supercurriculars into question 2, are there other areas like mentioned? So the whole personal statement is yours to kind of fill as you want. As I mentioned, we think question 2 is probably the best place for a lot of supercurriculars, but there's also question 3 that talks more about extracurriculars, but you can definitely link those two together and tell us what you think is most important for your application. So kind of use the space wisely. As long as you can make connections to what the question is asking you, that's absolutely fine. Do competitions and challenges count? Yes, absolutely. Things like essay competitions, which Magdalene also runs, and kind of maths challenges, Olympiads are all good things to include. If you take a gap year, can you apply in both year 13 and the year after? So yes, and a lot of students do. So you can choose to apply kind of in year 13 for deferred entry, which is where you apply for the following year. And universities can make you an offer for that year. But equally, if you change your mind with different universities or want to reapply, if you don't get an offer the first time around, you're welcome to apply again. Would an EPQ on a subject related to your degree be a good supercurricular? Yes, definitely. Don't make it the only supercurricular you talk about because it is done within school. But yes, it is a good thing to talk about if you do it. And do universities value extracurriculars like competitive sport? Good question. So universities like Oxford and Cambridge are mostly academics. We're very focused on supercurriculars that are academic related. Other universities do like to see a bit more kind of well-rounded things like other extracurriculars, and so you can put a mention for them kind of at the end or in question 3. But we'd always advise, if you're kind of running out of space, which you sometimes are, to focus on the academic things because you're applying for an academic course. Definitely don't stop your extracurriculars. They're great things to do to make you a well-rounded human being. But bear in mind that you're applying for an academic course at a university, so try and focus on supercurriculars that relate to that. Okay, we'll go on to the very last section and then we'll open it up to kind of any other miscellaneous questions. So a couple of things we may have already covered slightly, but just to kind of make this as clear as possible. If you're applying for several different courses at different universities, bear in mind you will have to write the same personal statement for all of them. One bit of advice is try and think about the overlap between the subjects. So for instance, if you're applying for history and politics, why is it you think those things are important to you together? Why is it important to you to do both of them? So is it the kind of the overlap between kind of the past and the present, or kind of political history teaching us certain things? So try and think about why it's important to you to do both of them rather than just one. Try and make some reference to all aspects of the chosen course. So one example is at Cambridge, we have a course called Human, Social and Political Sciences, which is broadly kind of politics, international relations, sociology and anthropology. And most people have a favourite, and that's fine. But bear in mind that it's not just a politics degree. So try and bring in a few different areas of elsewhere in the course to show your understanding of the range of content that you'll study if you get a place. And also, if you do choose to apply to Cambridge, you'll have the option to expand on your chosen course in the additional personal statement if you want to. If you want to include extenuating circumstances, so anything like physical or mental health conditions, caring responsibilities, financial hardship, this is often better placed in your teacher reference than your personal statement. You're more limited for space in your personal statement and want to focus on your academic achievements, but definitely talk to your teachers if you feel comfortable and ask them to include it in your teacher reference. For Cambridge, there's also an extra place to explain this in the My Cambridge application portal, and lots of universities will let you submit a separate extenuating circumstances form in much more detail if you want to as well. So definitely tell universities about these things, they are really important, but your personal statement is not always the best place just because of the character counts and the word limits. And do you need work experience? So some applicants will talk about work experience in their personal statement. This is only really advised or required for courses like medicine and veterinary medicine. In those cases, it's less about what you did, so kind of how many weeks you've got or however, and more about what you learned and how you can reflect on it. It's not required for other courses, but it would count as a super-curricular if it was relevant to your course. So again, for my example, I was applying for history at university and I had some work experience with my local MP. So it was more kind of politics than history, but I made some links in my personal statement about things that I'd read about political history and then how that was reflected in the present. And so I tied it in that way. Definitely not required, but it would count as a super-curricular if you could talk about it in a way that's relevant to your chosen course. Okay, before I open up to questions, just to make you aware that we have lots of other things coming up. So I mentioned our subject taster webinars, which are happening at the moment, and sign-ups are still open. These are on lots of different subjects that are offered at Cambridge and are really exciting ways to try out some subjects you may not have heard of before or want more information on, and they do count as super-curriculars. As does the Arts and Humanities essay competition, which is currently open. Have a look on our website. It's open till the end of April, so you can enter for the chance to win £300 and again, a super-curricular for your personal statement. And we also have the Cambridge Open Days coming up in July and September, which you're welcome to come along to and see us in person. So I will open up the chat to questions now and stop the recording. If you have no more questions, thank you so much for joining. There'll be a short feedback survey when you close the tab, so please do share your feedback. We hope you enjoyed it, but otherwise I'll stop the recording and go to questions.